yes.
Have you ever performed in one of his plays?
Well, I have. I'm in a drama school, The Caretaker, and not so long ago in The Caretaker too. And I did this film of The Room with Robert Altman. The No Man's Land, little productions in London. And having a conversation at the moment about doing The Dumbwaiter in Los Angeles. It may happen either later this year or next year.
Just want to look at you.
No, that's all right. Quite honestly, you've got plenty to sort of digest. I mean, it's very powerful stuff you've been exposed to.
You mentioned that you were talking with him about this. When did this whole idea come up?
Well,
how did it come up?
It came up.
What was the question?
Well, I was asked how the show came about, which, forgive me if it came about because Harold had committed himself to a recital, you see, in London in 2005, but his illness meant that he asked me to take over for him. So that's how I became familiar with the poetry. He was very specific, very clear about how he wanted it set, and very resentful, I think, of having to ask someone else to do it. He didn't. He appreciated my doing it, but there was. I think he never quite forgave me for doing it. And so after he died, I repeated the original recital as a memorial tribute in Los Angeles. I was in LA, and I peppered it with a few choice extracts from obituaries and a couple of my own thoughts. It was in a church in Hollywood. And we just very casually at the last minute put a digital recorder in my pocket and sort of recorded it. It wasn't a plan. But the response to the memorial tribute was very strong. I thought, well, we got a recording. I sent it to a couple of friends, one of whom was John Malkovich. And John was very taken by it. And when we met, he said, we could work this up into some sort of fully realized theatrical experience. And I said, well, we couldn't we? But it sounds like a lot of work. And I did it sort of in the form it was, for various places as benefits. And then somebody asked if I'd want to take it to the Edinburgh Festival. I thought, God, yeah, maybe, but better get hold of John and find out what he had in mind. And so we worked together and collaborated at that point. For the show, we took to Edinburgh and then took on tour around England last year. And that's how it came about. So it's an organic thing. It's evolving still. I mean, every performance is unique and specific to the time and place. Yeah, hello.
Hello. I'm just curious, when you went to have him tutor you about this presentation.
Yes.
Had you been close at all with him before that?
Socially, familiar, not close. I think the reason he asked me, I just played Tony Blair in David Hare's play, Stuff Happens. And we talked about that quite a lot. And I think, and that was right at the time he was thinking, what am I going to do? And then he asked me to, that's why. And I think when you work with somebody collaboratively, immediately the connection goes deeper. So, when I saw Harold after that time, I did feel there was a stronger connection. Because of, well, whenever, if you work with somebody, work is the great bond.
Yes.
When you work with people, especially on such personal material, it's an intimate thing. Right. So that creates I think you create a greater bond with somebody through work than you do over the dinner table or across a wine glass. I've done plenty of wine glasses with Harold,
but I'm sorry, but I have always been in such awe of his work. I
Yes.
think because the first thing I ever saw was the birthday party
Right.
in graduate school, and it just terrified me.
Yes.
Just terrifyingly menacing. And I can't even imagine having a casual conversation.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he did casual conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
No, so, I mean, he was, I don't recall ever a sort of, what you might call any small talk or any sort of social banter. It was always, if you had something to say, it better be serious, it better be deep, and otherwise shut up. So, you know, he was. I mean, he was. You know, the headmaster. I kept quiet and most of the time and listened. Harold was somebody I loved to listen to. I didn't necessarily, and he had such a sort of, you know, a powerful mental presence that you felt so stupid saying anything, and if it was worth saying, it usually came out all jumbled up. So better just to listen. You know, the old sort of, oh, tell me about that, Harold. So. Hello.
I wondered if he ever talked with you, or if you'd heard comments he'd made or read about either the similarities or the differences in approaching his work with film and working for theater.
I think he's written about that in his interview. There's an interview in here with Michael Billington where he certainly talks about writing for cinema and writing for the theatre. In terms of acting, we didn't really have that conversation.
Mr. Sands, thank you very much, first off, and also, I was wondering, would you like this to evolve in a particular way, or do you just seem to find yourself allowing it to happen as it occurs each performance?
Yeah, I think more the latter. I think more more the sort of casting chance of the winds of Providence than trying to work out something so structured. Although somebody, after one of the recent performances at the Odyssey Theatre, did say to me, you know, what, if you're clever, you could have somebody play this in London, somebody play it in New York, someone play it in Los Angeles, all calling themselves Julian Sands if you if you cast them right. And I looked at this person. You're out of your mind. And but they were deadly serious. They felt that somehow, you know, but I just see it as a personal story, which I enjoy sharing, because I enjoy the material so much, and I have such admiration for Harold. And I feel I can say so much more, which is articulate and fluent, with his presence hovering, than if he was actually physically there, when I'd be sort of dumb. So, I'd be a dumb lump of light.
Mouthing the words at you.
Yes, question at the back from the lady in pink.
Such an amazing thing to imagine being coached by the writer in how to speak his poetry aloud.
Yes.
Do you describe that? Is there anything that you can say about what he told you, or how he communicated to you how to, when you were sort of being the stand-in as you were beginning this process of film?
Well, I mean, it was specific to each of the poems. I mean, not all of them were part, which I read tonight, were part of that original recital. But those which were, yeah, he was very clear about. He was like a conductor, which is what I've said about John in some ways. You know, the rhythm and the meaning. And I mean, look, you know, it's absolutely true what I told you about connects and corrects. I mean, he gave me a lot of dark looks during the whole process. When there was another one in the poem, one of the war poems. I used to talk about, I asked him if it was the musical room or something. I remember him being furious for asking the question. I think I said, I was only asking Harold. He said, well, no. You should know, he said. Yeah, this is one I thought was another typo. When I said to him, look, the hamstring and the heart, Harold, it says torn apart in a musical room. Shouldn't that be in a music room? He said, no! But, you know, you sort of got the impression just from the one example, I guess.
Which brings me a little bit to the question, how did you find it difficult to let go of your own interpretation of his work and what you enjoyed before you found out what he wanted it to be and how he wanted you to hear it and how, you know what I'm saying? Did that create a conflict?
Well, I not really, because I don't think we were ever so far apart, because I think his writing is so economical, and the arrangement of the text on the page is so specific that a great deal of information comes with the structure. So he didn't ask me to do it because he thought I'd get it. So I was sort of following in the footsteps. I was a quick study, I think, with him. I wasn't saying, hey Harold, should we do this one as an iambic pentameter? Just to see.
Were you surprised at all, or were you so into him that you weren't surprised when you heard how he actually had conceived it in his head?
I was surprised by the poetry at all. I didn't know about it. I didn't know. I mean, he published it in little pamphlets, which would give to people. And I knew he sent odd poems to the Times Literary Supplement, but I didn't realize there was the body of work. And other people who'd referred to Harold's poetry very dismissively. So I had no idea of the richness and the completeness of it, this oeuvre, and just how good it was. So the whole thing, I turned up at his house, and I hadn't been given it in advance. I was given it when I came to him. And we weren't too far apart. Just a couple of things about me wondering if there were typos. And that's all. There was a question at the back. I saw somebody.
I have one.
Oh, hello, Jennifer.
So, of all the parts that you've played, how would you say that kind of embodying Pinter's words has affected you, or has it affected you in terms of how you see or hear life, or how you kind of approach other roles?
Yeah, very much so. I think, it is. I think the economy of language and the specificity of the structures he's used has made me consider all other dramatic writing in terms of its sound and intention. And I've found, certainly on the scripts I've been involved with since becoming familiar with Harold's poetry and developing this show, I'm always looking to cut words out, not add words. Actors are usually looking to add words and add lines. I'm always looking to reduce what there is to say, try and get it to be more essential. And in terms of performance, trying to, I think he has given me kind of confidence, kind of power, a kind of, in my own belief in my own thoughts, my own choices, which I think is focused all that a bit. Because when you're dealing with his work on a somewhat, the last year and a bit, a regular basis, I think he's a very sharp brain to be carrying around with you. it sharpens one up a bit, I would say. Hello. Not sharp enough to answer that very quick, that question.
Though the telephone piece comes very close to it, was there any, or is there any intent or impulse to have more of excerpting from the plays or screenplays?
Well, there are two factors. One, I think the idea was to try and keep the show pure to the poetry and prose which were not normally known. I have included little bits from plays on other evenings, but in general, I tried to make, the point I'm sort of making is that Harold reveals himself in his writing through his prose, through his interviews, through his poetry, and that the author, I think it's very difficult to write an essay about Harold the man from the study of his plays. You don't feel that and maybe you could do so. I find him very enigmatic and elusive in the plays. They're sort of channeled onto the paper, and I love them. I think they're amazing, extraordinary body of work. But the point is, it's in these other writing forms that he tells us who he is, and that's sort of what I've been trying to do with this show, is create an audio portrait of the man principally through his words, a little through mine, and through one or two other people's. Does that make sense? I mean, I hope it does.
So let's do two more, and then just so Julian has time to sign books for people who are interested. So we'll do one here and then finish there. So
I'm interested in learning a little bit about the migration of the project, the way in which Harold Pinter became Julian Sands. Harold Pinter. So what I'm getting at is you talked interestingly about the way in which you were corrected, to use the term correct rather than connect, but what you also did was decided on your own to use that poem in 3 separate places within the show.
Yeah.
So in some ways, this really was your portrait of Harold Pinter, and it moved away from, in some places, from what Harold Pinter must have had in mind. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your, the extent to which you felt compelled to produce a certain fidelity, and where you wanted to put your own fingerprint on this.
Well, it's an interesting question. I think where I'm quoting Harold. So that poem, I know the place it is true. Originally I did just say it once, and now it sort of defines the show. I say it 5 times. I mean, it bookends the show, and we have it in the middle. But each time it's fidelity to Harold. I am using it for emphasis and to begin and end the show, because I think it serves as an epitaph. It serves possibly as a singular statement of which defines the oeuvre of his poetry. I don't find there to be a conflict between my and then what I'm trying to do just practically as an actor, as a presenter, as a storyteller, is to arrange these poems and these prose and these stories and these ideas in a way which gives a balance to them, which makes for an arc through the evening, and so which tells in many ways the story of Harold and Antonia. I think my own, and that's why working with John, yes, we've tried to structure something which will hold your attention, and I hope it did, and give a flow to the work as it's arranged. a little bit like arranging a symphony or hanging a show in a gallery. You know, you think very carefully of which pictures people look at first and which at the end. And we've been changing the order and playing with new material and shifting things around throughout, and something may change next time I do it. But it's sort of settling into a pattern which seems to be holding.
Last question?
Do you have a sense of what about your essence as a person or as an actor drew him to you? And I mean, I can't imagine that he chose you lightly in carrying on his work in this way or starting that project. Do you have a sense of what the connection was?
I think the connection was what somebody else said. I hear Harold liked the cut of your jib. And I said, well, yes, lucky me. So I think there was a particular lunch, another lunch at Tony's house, where we had a lot to say to each other. It was quite a meaningful, grown-up conversation. And I just finished doing the Tony Blair role in David Hare's plays. We did talk about, you know, his work quite a bit, my involvement with it, and I think he liked my voice, perhaps, you know, the way I stood. He was very clear, you know, that he wanted me to do. Yeah, he could have called any actor, I suppose. I took it as a great sort of privilege that he asked me to. I never, you know, I didn't say to him, Harold, why me? I didn't invite him to consider the fact that he'd actually pick up the phone. So I can't fully answer that question. I can just say I was happy that he did, because it introduced me to this work which really, really connected with me, and which I value, and I value the opportunity of, you know, presenting it, reading it. I find it enthralling.